Are INFJs huge nerds? I was inspired to share some thoughts on this front because a follower, or at least a viewer called Menaya, had a comment on my last video. My last video was on was asking the question, or was rather saying that INFJs are not as cool as people think, or at least as a lot of people think. And a lot of interesting reactions to my video, I think mostly corroborating what I was talking about from INFJs and also some INTJs, because I tend to, sort of bunch them up together sometimes, given that a lot of the INFJ experience is determined by NI dominance, and that's shared by INTJs. Of course, there are differences between FE and T, which I try to, do justice to in my content. But anyway, Menaya made me laugh because the comments basically reads, they read my title, the title of the video, and said, well, my first impression was that INFJs are just huge nerds. And at first I laughed, and then it got me thinking, it's tempting to think that INFJs are huge nerds, given that they are usually not cool, that they are quite cerebral, that it can be kind of awkward in public. We can be awkward in public. We don't really feel like we belong, and we can be very passionate about certain topics, right? So it's undeniable that from that particular perspective, and therefore from the perspective of people who are the opposite of nerds, we would be considered nerds. INFJs, INTJs would be considered nerds, simply insofar as we are in our heads a lot, and we tend to show interest in particular pursuits, in particular topics that are not considered mainstream, particularly when you get past a certain age and you're supposed to be focused on like serious adult, day-to-day stuff, and that if you're an INFJ, you're going to want to maintain a connection with the NI world. You're going to want to if you like, maintain that connection by doing lots of reading, by being kind of esoteric sometimes, or by being very in-depth psychologically. So again, in a sense, the more mainstream the perspective, the more mainstream the standpoint, the more likely an INFJ is going to be considered a nerd. But actually, what I want to emphasize is that from the INFJ perspective, from the stance of INFJ experience, I don't think INFJs are comfortable saying they're nerds or seeing themselves as nerds. And it's not even from a self-acceptance kind of point of view. I'm not trying to claim that INFJs find it difficult to accept the fact that they are nerdy. It's something else. I think if you look at INTPs, INFPs, even ENFPs, ENTPs, and a bunch of other types, there's a lot of people in that category that are quite comfortable with their nerdiness. It's not to say that they would just go outside and shout to everybody, I'm a nerd. But they have nerdy pursuits, and they're happy to do that, and they're happy to engage in that. And it's something that they accept about themselves. It's something that makes sense to them. They're like, yeah, okay, if what I'm doing, if what I have an interest in, or interests in, is what's called a nerd by the mainstream, being a nerd, then yeah, that's what I am. I think INFJs, I don't really know about the experience of INTJs, partly because I am not one, and I'm talking about an intimate existential moment, an experience of asking oneself, for an INFJ, am I nerdy? Am I a nerd? It seems to me that a lot of the time INFJs don't really see themselves as nerdy, and they are uncomfortable with the idea that they are nerdy. And it's difficult to explain what the cause of this is, and perhaps there will be some among you in the comments who will say, no, like I'm a nerd, and that's fine. So I think there are different possible explanations. One possible explanation is that because INFJs are old souls, because they tend to experience time as like a vast stretch of time unfolding from the distant past into the distant future, they find themselves to be kind of intemporal being. Cognitive type talks about translocal beings. You can also talk about timeless beings. There's a very strong theme of timelessness in NI dominance, and it's reinforced by FE auxiliary. And in the sense that there's something very, very temporal, very of the moment in this conception of being a nerd, right? You wouldn't really have used the term to describe people prior to like the 1980s or something, or maybe 1970s, certainly not many centuries ago, or even a century ago, or millennia ago. And because INFJs experience themselves in some way as timeless beings, or as cross-temporal beings, I just think nerdy, or being a nerd, just sounds a little bit too temporal, just sounds a little bit too contemporary for them. So that's one hypothesis. Another hypothesis that I would consider to taking seriously is that again, being a nerd is an identity marker in this world right now, right? It might seem strange, but in fact, by identifying as being nerdy or being a nerd, in a sense, you're saying, I am of this world, I belong in this world, and that's the stance I take on this world, right? In fact, nerds are doing better than ever, like they are billionaires now in tech and other fields. So INFJs don't really see themselves as belonging to the world in a primordial sense. They feel themselves as distant, segregated, alienated from the world. They feel the sense of severance between external reality and the NI world that they inhabit. And for this reason, I think that this discomfort might well arise from this sense of being disconnected from anything that is a category of this world, including being a nerd. So maybe that was a bit of a far-fetched analysis, but again, the notion ultimately is that INFJs are not comfortable being boxed into a single identity, which is what I call the infinite stance. And if you embrace the infinite stance, that's the path, in fact, to INFJ liberation. If you want to hear more about this, well, I have a book which is appositely called The Infinite Soul, which explores this very topic, and it discusses how, it's called INFJ Life in the Modern World, how INFJs can find meaning, purpose, and value in this world is often hostile to us, and in spite or thanks to alienation in many ways. If you want to explore the prequel to The Infinite Soul, it's The Ecstatic Soul, which explores the depths of INFJ consciousness. It's a very in-depth book. You should get it if you haven't yet. Don't forget, The Infinite Soul needs more reviews, so if you would like to drop a review if you love the book, please do that. And don't forget as well that the lifeblood of my channel is my Patreon page, where I get donations from very generous supporters. You can interact with me there, you can suggest video content. We do some young readings. I share some bonus video content for patrons as well. It's only $3.50 a month, and it helps massively to keep the channel going. So consider it, and I'll talk to you next time, guys. Bye-bye.